In 1995, a 5-year-old girl vanished from a sleepy lakeside town in northern Michigan during what was supposed to be a routine family picnic. Her name was Emily Hartwell. No body was ever found. No ransom note. No trace. 30 years passed, and then, just last week, an anonymous email arrived at the Cold Case Division of the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Office. Attached to it was a recent photo of a woman in her 30s, with a caption that read, "You were looking for her." The image was geotagged from a rural village in northern Romania. Now, in a small, dimly lit evidence room surrounded by corkboards and file boxes, retired Detective Raymond Keller stares at the printed image. His hands tremble slightly. He's seen this face before, in the dozens of childhood photos that once littered his desk, back when the Hartwell case had consumed every waking moment of his life. The photo shows a woman standing near a chapel, her expression serene, her eyes unmistakable. Those same wide hazel eyes, the same birthmark above the right eyebrow. Could it really be Emily? The overhead fluorescent light buzzes faintly as Keller lowers himself into the chair, exhales slowly, and opens the old case file. Dust rises from the faded cover marked, "Hartwell, Emily, missing, 07-29-95. He flips through the first page, a police report scribbled in ink, the words now faint. He whispers to no one, "I never stopped looking." Outside the evidence room, rain taps against the windows like fingernails. The building is nearly empty, just Keller, the storm, and 30 years of silence waiting to be broken. He pulls out the original photo taken the day Emily disappeared. She's smiling, arms outstretched, tiny sneakers barely tied. Her dress is yellow, her hair in 2 neat braids. The background is a picnic table covered with sandwiches and juice boxes, and a wide stretch of trees beyond. Keller reaches for his old tape recorder and clicks it on. Entry 1. June 3rd, 2025. I've received a photo that may be the first real lead in the Emily Hartwell case in over 3 decades. I'm reopening this investigation. Alone, if I have to. Then he pauses and presses play on a file recovered from the anonymous email, a short video clip. In it, the same woman from the photo walks past a stone wall and into the frame. For a moment, she looks directly into the camera and smiles. It's subtle, but Keller feels it in his chest. That smile. It's not random. It's recognition. Leans back in his chair, heart pounding, rain still falling. The image burned into his mind. Emily Hartwell may be alive, and someone out there wants her to be found or wants her to be seen. But not everything about this feels right. Something is off, terribly off, and Keller knows in his bones that this case will break something open, in the past and in himself. Because he remembers the look on her mother's face at the press conference in '95. He remembers the lie buried in that investigation. And now, he'll have to dig it all up again. It was the summer of 1995, the kind of summer that seemed endless in a place like Glen Arbor, Michigan. The air was heavy with pine and lake mist, the streets quiet except for the occasional rustle of bicycles and laughter from the marina. That Saturday, July 29th, the Hartwell family had driven out to the Sleeping Bear Dunes picnic area for what was supposed to be a simple, sunny afternoon together. Emily, their only child, had just turned 5 a few weeks earlier. She was small for her age, curious and observant, with a quiet nature that often made strangers assume she was older than she looked. Her mother, Denise, packed a basket with sandwiches, juice boxes, and carrot sticks. Her father, Rob, loaded. The back of their forest green station wagon with folding chairs and a frisbee. By 11 a.m., they had settled at a shaded table overlooking Lake Michigan. Emily ran between the picnic blanket and the trees, her yellow dress a fluttering dot of color against the green. Around 11:20 a.m., she wandered toward a narrow footpath that cut through the woods. Denise remembered calling her name, not in alarm, just the casual tone of a mother keeping tabs. Emily didn't answer. She didn't come back, and that was the last time anyone saw her. Rob called out next. Then they both got up, looking around with growing urgency. A few minutes passed. Denise jogged toward the trail. Rob searched the parking lot. Nothing. No sounds, no crying, no footprints. The next hours were a blur. Park rangers, then police. Search teams with dogs. Helicopters. Hundreds of volunteers. Over the next 7 days, Glen Arbor became the center of one of the largest missing child investigations in Michigan's history. But there was no trace. No fibers. No clothing. No tire marks. It was like she had evaporated. Detective Keller was 42 back then, newly transferred from Grand Rapids. He still remembers standing beneath that pine canopy, breathing in the scent of wet bark and old moss, while officers combed the area. He remembers Denise Hartwell, trembling, eyes rimmed red, clutching. Emily's stuffed rabbit like it was the only thing keeping her standing. And Rob pacing in tight circles, muttering the same sentence over and over. She was just here. Just here. In the months that followed, theories flooded in. A bear attack, though no evidence supported it. A kidnapping by a stranger, but there were no vehicles spotted, no unfamiliar witnesses, no security footage. The more time passed, the stranger it all seemed. At one point, a neighbor came forward with a vague memory of seeing a dark sedan parked oddly near the dune's entrance. But the lead went cold. The license plate was partial, the sighting unconfirmed. By winter, the search was called off. The Hartwells moved out of state, first to Ohio, then reportedly to upstate New York. They stopped giving interviews after the 1-year mark. Emily's photo remained on missing children posters for another 5 years, until the printers stopped calling, and the world, as it always does, moved on, but Keller never did. Even after retirement, he kept the box, the photos, the maps, the rabbit. He couldn't explain why, only that the silence of the case gnawed at him. Too clean, too sudden, too surgical. And now, 30 years later, the same eyes stared back at him from a new photo. Not a child. Woman, smiling in Romania. He ran the image through every facial recognition tool he could find. The hit ratio came back at 97.4%. Age progression lined up. Bone structure, eye shape. Even the faint scar on the left cheek from when Emily fell off her bike at age 4. Denise had shown him the ER paperwork back then. It was her, or someone, made to look like her. Keller picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 2 decades. It rang 5 times before a woman's voice answered. Hello? Denise, it's Keller. A pause. Then a breath. I was wondering when you'd call. He froze. She already knew. Keller hadn't spoken to Denise Hartwell in over 20 years. Not since the last time he knocked on her door, holding a report that said nothing new. Just another dead end. Just another false sighting. Back then, she'd opened the door slowly, her eyes dull, her mouth tight, the hollowed look of someone who'd learned to live without hope. But now her voice held something different. Not surprise, not confusion, readiness. You saw the photo, she said. Keller sat up straighter. You knew it existed? Another pause, then not exactly. But I've felt something these past few months, something shifting. You spend your life in a tunnel and suddenly you smell fresh air. She sounded different too, more grounded, less broken. Where are you now? Keller asked. I'm in Vermont, married again. Quiet place. Can you talk? Not on the phone, she replied. Come see me. If you're reopening this, you'll want to see what I found. What you found? She didn't answer that, just gave him an address. Then, hung up. 2 days later, Keller stood on the porch of a weathered farmhouse nestled in the folds of the Green Mountains. Late spring rain fell in soft sheets. Wind chimes whispered near the eaves. Denise opened the door. She looked older, coarse, but there was a steadiness in her eyes now, not peace exactly, but something resembling resilience. Her gray hair was pulled into a loose bun and her hands were dusted with flour. Baking, she said by way of explanation. Come in. The house smelled like cinnamon and warm butter. Keller stepped inside, instantly transported to another. The walls were lined with framed photos. But none of Emily. None at all, as if she still couldn't bear to display them, or didn't need to anymore. Denise led him to the kitchen and poured tea. She didn't speak right away, and Keller didn't press her. After a long silence, she opened a drawer and pulled out a small, beat-up envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It showed a wooden bridge surrounded by forest, and standing on it, a young girl, no older than 5. Keller leaned in. The child's face was turned slightly to the side, but there was no mistaking it. "Where did this come from?" he asked, voice low. "Last fall. It arrived in the mail. No return address. No message, just the photo. Why didn't you tell anyone?" Denise looked at him, eyes steady. "Because I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if it was real or someone playing a very cruel game. And to be honest, Ray, I was scared of what it might awaken." He studied the image again. The girl in the photo was dressed in a pale blue sweater and corduroy pants. In her hand, she clutched something small, fuzzy, almost out of frame. Keller squinted. "A stuffed rabbit?" Denise nodded. "Her rabbit, the one she took with her that day. I told the police back then it was white with one ear torn and a button eye. They never found it." Keller turned the Polaroid over. There, in faded black ink, were 2 numbers. 1995 P07. "Date stamp?" he asked. "Looks like it." Keller stared at the image, then at Denise. "You're saying someone took this photo of her? After the day she disappeared?" Denise didn't blink. "I'm saying someone had her, kept her, and let her be seen. On purpose." Keller stood, slowly pacing the length of the kitchen. "This photo, then the email. Both anonymous, both just enough to pull us back in." Denise said nothing, but he could feel her watching him. "This bridge," he murmured, pointing at the photo. "It's not from around here." "No," she said. "I checked. It's not from anywhere near Glen Arbor either." "Did you trace it?" "I tried. Posted it anonymously in an online forum. An architecture student wrote back. Said it looked like a traditional Romanian footbridge. Mid-20th century rural style. That's when I started looking deeper. That's when I saw the photo you found." Keller felt a coldness spread through his chest. "This wasn't an accident. Someone is guiding us." Denise's voice dropped to a whisper. "Or testing us. Outside." The rain fell harder now. Inside, the past pressed in from every corner, and neither of them were ready for how deep this would go. The next morning, Keller sat alone in a corner booth of a small diner off Route 7, a steaming cup of black coffee in front of him. The Polaroid lay flat on the table, shielded from view by a folded napkin. His laptop buzzed quietly as he refreshed the same search. Results for the 4th time. Romanian footbridges, forest chapels, isolated villages. None of it gave him what he needed, but a thread was beginning to form, faint, almost invisible, in the way these images connected. The bridge, the chapel in the recent photo, the woman's eyes, the rabbit. Keller opened a new tab and began typing. Romania, plus child abduction, plus cult activity, plus isolated community. The results were a mess of rumors, conspiracy forums, and old news articles, most of them nonsense. But buried near the bottom of the page was a link to a 2009 investigative piece from a French journalist. The headline read, "The Quiet Children of Branesti, Are They Real?" Keller clicked. The article told of a remote village in northern Romania, near the Ukrainian border, where travelers had reported sightings of children with American features, blonde, red-headed, olive-skinned, who spoke little, if any, Romanian. Some had claimed the children were kept in silence. Others spoke of a woman referred to only as the Matron. One photo accompanied the article, a blurry image of a child standing near a small ornate chapel. Keller froze. It was the same chapel as in the recent photo from the email. He quickly downloaded the image, enhanced the clarity, and overlaid it with the one he had printed. A perfect match. He sat back, heart hammering. He had a location. Back in Vermont, he returned to Denise's farmhouse just before dusk. She opened the door with tired eyes. "You found something," he nodded, stepping inside. "A place called Branesti in Suceava County, northern Romania. The chapel in the background of that email photo? It's there." Denise's breath caught. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." She gripped the edge of the kitchen table. "I don't know what this means," she whispered. Keller didn't reply immediately. Instead, he unfolded the French article and set it beside the Polaroid. "I think it means Emily might not have been alone." Denise looked at the photos, then at Keller. "You think she was taken with others?" "I think she was taken for a purpose." He watched her eyes flicker, saw the storm rising behind them. Denise nodded slowly. "Then we go." Keller blinked. "We?" "She's my daughter. I've lived 30 years without answers. I'm not letting someone else walk into that place before me." He studied her. She was older now. Not fragile, but changed. Still, something in her voice left no room for argument. "All right," he said. "We go." Denise turned away for a moment, steadying herself at the kitchen sink. "You said the children were described as quiet?" "Yes. And raised by someone called the Matron." Keller nodded. Denise's voice dropped low. "My mother used to say, 'Silence is taught.'" Then she turned back to him. "We need to know what was taught to Emily." Outside, the sun dipped behind the hills. Inside, the two of them began planning their journey to the last place anyone thought to look. The plane touched down in Suceava just after 11 a.m. A gray drizzle coated the runway and the surrounding. Hills were cloaked in dense pine forest. Keller adjusted his coat as he stepped off the aircraft, the cold slicing through his sleeves like thin knives. Denise followed silently, her face tight, unreadable beneath a wool scarf. They didn't speak much during the flight. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been swallowed by 30 years of waiting. Their driver, a man named Soren, arranged through a local contact, met them outside baggage claim. He was short, with sun-leathered skin and hands that looked like they'd gripped a shovel more often than a steering wheel. His English was rough, but clear. "Branesti is 3 hours," he said, opening the rear door of an aging Dacia 4X4. "Road is not good." They drove in silence, the car weaving through winding mountain passes and narrow roads barely wider than a cart trail. Keller stared out the window, watching villages pass like forgotten timepieces. Stone houses with sagging roofs, wooden gates, smoke curling from crooked chimneys. Eventually, Soren spoke. "You come for the chapel?" Keller exchanged a glance. "With Denise. You know it?" Soren nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "Very old, but not used. Not for church. Used by others." "Others?" Keller asked carefully. Soren hesitated. "Children's house, not normal school, private people, closed now, long time." "What kind of people?" "Rich ones," Soren muttered. "Foreign. Come quiet. Leave quiet." Keller leaned forward. "And the children?" Soren didn't answer. He just stared ahead, jaw tight as the car pushed deeper into the forest. They arrived in Branesti as the rain stopped. The village looked like it hadn't changed in 100 years. Cobblestone streets, sagging signs, a central square with a rusted clock tower frozen at 2:13. There was a bakery, a post office, and a boarded-up police kiosk. No children played outside, no dogs barked, just silence. Soren parked in front of a faded inn. "Best place to sleep. I wait outside." Inside, the innkeeper was a woman in her 50s named Adela. Her eyes lingered a beat too long on Denise as they checked in, but she said nothing, just handed them keys and warned, "No walking after dark." Keller raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Adela shrugged. "Wolves and stories." That night, in their tiny adjoining rooms, Keller laid the photos across the bedspread again. The Polaroid, the email printout, the French article. Denise stood by the window, arms crossed, staring into the darkened street below. "I don't like this place," she said. Keller didn't respond. He was staring at the edge of the chapel image, a shadow that had always seemed like part of the tree line. But now, he realized it wasn't. It was a figure. He enlarged the image on his tablet, adjusted the contrast. There, half concealed in the trees, nearly indistinct, a person. Watching, Denise stepped closer, her breath caught. "That's not Emily." Keller nodded. Someone was there. He grabbed his notebook and flipped back to his notes from the article. "The matron," he muttered. They always described her as watching, always watching the children. Denise's voice dropped to a whisper. Then maybe she saw who took Emily. Keller looked up, or maybe she didn't let go. They returned to the chapel at first light. Soren had warned them. The path was narrow and flooded from the night's storm. But Keller insisted. The sooner they reached the place from the photo, the better chance they had of finding something that hadn't been disturbed. The trail was overgrown, thick with brambles and mud. Denise moved slowly, carefully, her boots sinking into the wet earth. The trees around them leaned close, forming a canopy that filtered the pale morning sun into cold, scattered fragments. Finally, the clearing opened, and there it was. The chapel, smaller than expected. Stone walls, weathered with time. A single, arched window. Moss growing up one side like a slow infection. It sat still, like something abandoned mid-thought. Denise stopped a few feet away. Her breath caught in her throat. "This is it," she whispered. Keller approached the building cautiously. The wooden door was partially ajar, its hinges swollen with age. He pushed gently. It creaked open. The inside smelled of rot and cold stone. Dust floated in the air. A row of wooden pews, child-sized, sat in two neat lines, as if still waiting for the next sermon. At the far end, beneath a crude wooden cross, was a raised platform and a table. Not an altar. A desk. Keller stepped closer. Everything was coated in dust, except the surface of the desk. Someone had touched it. Recently. He reached into his coat and pulled out gloves. Carefully, he opened the drawer. Inside was a stack of yellowing papers. He picked up the top sheet. Children's. Drawings. Crayon. Scribbled handwriting in English. Denise leaned over his shoulder. "Oh my God." The drawings weren't playful. They were instructions. Stick figures kneeling, crying. One with a red X over its mouth. Another with wide staring eyes and arms outstretched toward a dark looming figure labeled only Mother. Keller flipped through more sheets, each one more unsettling. Some dated as late as 2002. That meant children had been here long after Emily disappeared. At the bottom of the pile was a small envelope sealed. Keller opened it carefully. Inside was a Polaroid. Another one. This time the girl was older, maybe 7, maybe 8, still wearing the same birthmark, still unmistakably Emily. But her expression was different now, detached, like she'd been taught not to feel. Denise stumbled back a step, her hand over her mouth. "She was here," she whispered. "She lived here." Keller turned the page. Day 17, still refuses to speak, cries at night, but she draws the rabbit constantly. The others watch her. Day 42, she begins to repeat the prayers, slowly, hesitantly. The matron is pleased. He kept reading. The entries blurred. Into a pattern. Conditioning. Silence. Indoctrination. A doctrine of isolation. Purity. Control. One line stopped him cold. Day 109. She calls me mother now. Keller closed the book. When he emerged from the basement, his face was pale. He handed the journal to Denise without a word. She opened it, read a few lines, then looked up at him, her voice cracking. They rewrote her. He nodded. This was never a kidnapping. Denise stood, trembling. This was a conversion. Outside, the forest swayed in a rising wind. And somewhere far from here, a woman who looked like Emily Hartwell walked the earth, still shaped by the ghosts of this place. But what neither Keller nor Denise yet realized was that someone else knew they had come and was already watching. That evening, the village of Branesti felt even quieter than before. Keller and Denise sat in the dim dining room of the inn, untouched plates in front of them. The fire crackled softly in the corner, but did little to warm the heaviness between them. The journal lay on the table, closed. Denise hadn't said a word since reading the final page. Her face was blank, but her hands were clenched, trembling. Finally, Keller broke the silence. There's a name mentioned here, only once. T. Avram. The matron refers to him as the financier. Denise looked up slowly. Who is he? Keller shook his head. I don't know yet. But this kind of operation, it wasn't just one woman in the woods. Someone built this, funded it, hid it. A door creaked open behind them. Soren stepped in from the rain, water dripping from the brim of his cap. His eyes lingered too long on the table, on the journal. Before he spoke, "You went to the chapel." It wasn't a question. Denise straightened. Yes. Soren stepped closer, his boots echoing faintly on the wooden floor. You shouldn't have. Keller watched him carefully. You know what was done there. Soren glanced over his shoulder. The inn was empty. Just them. Then he sat down at the table. My mother was born in Branesti, he began, voice low. She used to tell me stories about the silent ones, children who didn't go to school, who weren't allowed in the square, who only spoke when told. People said they were orphans, but we knew better. He hesitated. One night when I was 10, I followed one of them, a girl. She walked from the chapel to the forest. She didn't see me, but I watched her stop at a tree and dig. Denise leaned forward. Dig what? Soren looked at her. Box. Small. She buried something. I was too scared to check. Do you remember where? He nodded slowly. I can take you, but not now. Not in the dark. Keller studied him. Something about the man had shifted. No longer just a driver. No longer a quiet bystander. You've known this your whole life, Keller said. Soren met his eyes. I've carried this my whole life. Denise touched his hand. Then help us finish it. Soren nodded. But you need to understand something. First, he said. He reached into his coat and pulled out an old, folded photo. It showed 5 children standing in a line, eyes blank, expressions hollow, and at the center, a girl with a familiar face. Emily, beside her, arm resting on her shoulder, was an older woman in a pale gray dress, the matron. And next to the matron stood a tall man with dark, deep-set eyes. T. Avram, Soren whispered. My uncle. Denise stared at the photograph, her breath caught in her throat. The man in the picture exuded something unnatural. It wasn't just his presence beside the children. It was his posture, the way his eyes didn't meet the camera. As if he wasn't unaware of being photographed, but uninterested in it, detached, like someone who didn't need to hide. Keller leaned closer, examining the corners of the photo. There was a faint number written in pencil, 82C-R, possibly a catalog or internal code. Where did you get this? He asked. Soren's eyes dropped. My mother. She was a cleaning woman for the matron's estate. She kept it hidden for years. After her death, I found it with a bundle of letters and a necklace I remember her wearing once, when I was very small. He hesitated. There were things she never spoke about, but she was terrified of Avram. Keller's mind turned. Over. Your uncle, is he still alive? Soren looked up slowly. He disappeared in 2004. The authorities claimed he died in a boating accident on the Danube. Claimed? Keller asked. Soren nodded. His body was never recovered, but 2 years later, someone saw him. Where? In a monastery near Tulsia. No one dared approach, but he left a donation envelope. With his name inside, Keller scribbled notes furiously. So you believe he's still alive? I believe he's watching, Soren said. A silence settled between them. Denise finally spoke, her voice quiet, but hard. Why are you helping us, Soren? He paused, then turned his eyes to her. Because I saw that girl, he said. 30 years ago, in the woods. I thought she was a ghost for most of my life, but now I know she was real. And no one came for her. No one stopped them. No one said her name. He pointed to the photograph. I couldn't speak then, but I can speak now. Keller nodded, absorbing every word. Tomorrow, Soren said, I take you to the burial site, where the girl buried the box. And then? Denise asked. Soren's expression turned grim. Then you go to Tulsia. Why? Because if Avram is alive, he will know you're here. Keller sat back, his chest heavy. They hadn't just uncovered a hidden truth. They had disturbed something. And whatever still lived in the shadows of this country, of this network, was beginning to stir. Outside the inn, the rain had turned to ice, and far from Branesti, in a room lit only by candlelight, a man with dark, deep-set eyes stared at a wall covered in old photographs. He reached for one, Emily Hartwell, age 7. He smiled and whispered, She remembers. At dawn, the clouds hung low over Branesti, casting the village in an eerie, bluish light. Denise stood on the back porch of the inn, wrapped in her coat, her breath rising in clouds. She hadn't slept. Not really. The image of Emily, aged, altered, conditioned, haunted every moment her eyes closed. Inside, Keller poured coffee into a dented thermos, stuffing a notebook into his coat pocket. He watched Denise through the window for a long moment before stepping out. We can still walk away, he said gently. No one would blame you. Denise didn't turn to him. You would. He said nothing. She finally looked over. Don't. You see, Ray, I thought the worst had already happened, but what we've found, this is something deeper, something done to her. If she's alive, she's not mine anymore. Keller's voice was low, but she could be again. Denise looked away. Moments later, Soren pulled up in the Dacia, engine rumbling like a sleeping beast. They climbed in and the car rumbled out of town, up a thin trail that twisted through dense, frost-bitten woods. After 30 minutes, Soren stopped near a grove of birch trees. Here, he said, pointing to a clearing. They walked in silence until they reached a crooked tree with an unusual scar, a long vertical gash like a wound. At its base, Soren knelt and began digging with a small spade. After a few inches, the blade hit something solid. Wood. He cleared the dirt slowly, carefully lifting out a narrow tin box sealed in wax cloth. Keller helped unwrap it. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, yellowed with age, and a small charm bracelet. Denise gasped. That's hers, that's Emily's. Keller unfolded the paper. It was a child's drawing. Stick figures again, a girl, a woman in gray, and a tall man, standing behind them. The girl had a single red tear drawn on her cheek. The background showed mountains and a long winding road. On the bottom corner in trembling crayon, I want to go home. Denise dropped to her knees. Her fingers trembled as she touched the bracelet. She remembered. She whispered. Keller turned, the drawing over, more crayon but messier as if rushed. Just one word, Tulsia. Soren paled. She tried to tell, even back then. Keller stared at the map forming in his mind. Then that's where we go. But Denise didn't answer. She was staring into the woods. Keller followed her gaze. A figure stood there, motionless, watching. Then, just as quickly, it disappeared into the trees. Keller ran forward, shouting, but the forest swallowed every sound. When he returned, breathless, Soren already had the car running. Denise was still on her knees, holding the bracelet against her. Chest, she's alive, she whispered. And for the first time since arriving in Romania, she began to cry. Keller crouched beside Denise, his hand on her back as her sobs broke through the stillness of the woods. The bracelet, small and faded, glinted in her palm. Each charm told a story, a bunny, a book, a tiny sunflower. I gave her this on her 5th birthday, she whispered. The night before the picnic, she wanted to sleep with it on. I told her no, said it might get lost. Her voice cracked, and she lost it anyway, along with everything else. Keller looked at the drawing again, then tucked it carefully into his coat. "We're not losing her again," he said. Soren, standing nearby, cleared his throat. "We should go. If someone was watching, we shouldn't stay here." They returned to the car in silence, the engine rumbling back to life as they descended from the forest. As they neared the edge of the village, Keller glanced at the rearview mirror. A dust plume lingered behind them, but no vehicle, no sound. Still, someone had been there. He searched deeper. Not a town, not a street, a property, a private estate, registered to a shell company, located on the outskirts of Tulsia, just beyond a protected wetland reserve. A place with no website, no contact, no roads visible on satellite view. The last known owner? Tiberiu Avram. Keller's chest tightened. He stood, heart racing, and walked quickly up the stairs to Denise's room. He knocked gently. "Denise, you need to see this." She opened the door slowly, eyes red, face composed. He handed her the tablet. That name on the back of the drawing, Tulsia, wasn't a clue. It was a direction. She stared at the image on the screen, a faded overhead satellite photo of a large, isolated building surrounded by marshland. Denise looked at Keller, voice low. "She's there. I think so. We leave tomorrow," she said. Keller nodded, but as he turned off the tablet, something in the image caught his attention. In the center courtyard of the estate was a tree, twisted, large, familiar. He pulled the Polaroid from his coat, the one signed with the tree symbol. They matched. Not just the tree, the place. It wasn't just where Emily was now. It was where it had all started. And maybe where it was all meant to end. The road to Tulsia was long, winding, and mostly empty. Denise sat in the back of the Dacia, fingers clutching the charm bracelet as though it might dissolve if she let go. Keller rode up front with Soren, navigating through fields of mist and long stretches of pine, the silence inside the vehicle punctuated only by the low hum of the engine. Soren spoke little, but when they crossed into Tulsia County, his eyes narrowed. "This land used to be part of something bigger," he said. "Before the revolution, it belonged to the state. After '89, men like Avram bought it for nothing, promised to build orphanages, sanctuaries." He scoffed under his breath. "They built prisons." Keller glanced at the GPS. They were getting close. The Haveli estate didn't appear on any public registry, but satellite coordinates marked its perimeter. A squared compound in the middle of wetlands, surrounded by fencing and trees too tall to grow naturally. By noon, they reached the last accessible road. Beyond that, it was foot travel. "We go from here," Soren said, parking the car beneath a line of cypress trees. Keller helped Denise out. The air was warmer now, the sunlight filtered through low clouds, but there was a stillness to it, a kind of hush, as though the trees themselves were listening. They walked for nearly 30 minutes before reaching a clearing, and there it was, Haveli, a pale, angular building with shuttered windows and high walls, like a monastery carved into the earth. Ivy crept up one side. There were no signs of life, no birds, no movement. Just the distant creak of wood shifting in wind. Denise stood frozen. "I dreamed of this place," she murmured. "I didn't know it was real, but I saw it. Always this exact shape, this sky." Keller scanned the area. "We don't go in blind," he said. "We observe. We look for movement. A sound. Behind them. Twigs snapping." Keller spun. But the woods were empty. Or so they seemed. "Keep moving," he said, voice tense. They circled to the north wall, where a section of fencing had collapsed. Beyond it, a garden, overgrown and wild. Statues lined the path, worn smooth by time. At the far end, a door, metal, rusted. Soren knelt beside it. "Old lock," he whispered. "But broken." He pushed gently. It opened with a groan. And inside, silence. They stepped through. Dim corridors stretched out before them. Faint scuff marks on the stone floor, dried vines clinging to walls, and a scent, faint but unmistakable, burned wax, and lavender. Keller held up his flashlight, casting a beam across faded murals, children painted in circles, eyes upturned. At the center of each mural, a tree, always watching. Then came the voice, soft, echoing, "You shouldn't have come." Denise froze. From the end of the hall, a figure stepped into view. Not a guard, not Avram, but a woman, gray dress, barefoot, her face worn by time, but unmistakable. The matron, alive and smiling. The matron's footsteps were soundless as she approached, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She looked older than the photos, yes, but not frail. There was a sharpness in her posture, a coldness in her calm. "I've been expecting you," she said, her voice like silk stretched too tight. Denise stepped forward before Keller could stop her. "Where is she?" The matron tilted her head, eyes settling on Denise with a kind of distant curiosity. "She is not yours anymore." Keller pulled Denise gently back, stepping between them. "You're going to tell us everything. About the chapel, the drawings, the children." The matron's smile didn't fade. "You still think this is about a child lost in the woods," she said softly. "You came all this way chasing a ghost and found the roots instead." She gestured to the hallway behind her. "Come. If you want answers, you'll have them." Keller hesitated. Every instinct screamed trap. But something deeper, older, told him this woman wasn't afraid of them. She wanted them to see. They followed her down the corridor, past empty rooms, past faded murals, into a circular chamber where daylight streamed through a cracked dome overhead. Books lined the walls, candles flickered on iron sconces, and in the center of the room, a long wooden table. Laid across it were files, photos, reports, dozens of them, children, different faces, different years, all marked with strange symbols in the corners. Some carried red stamps, released, others black, failed. Keller flipped one open, a boy from Manchester, another from Ontario, a girl from Nebraska, all missing. All presumed dead, and all had passed through here. "You trafficked them," he said, his voice low and shaking. "You turned them into..." "Into what?" The matron's smile faded at last. "I gave them order," she said. "We took what the world discarded, broken things, forgotten things, and gave them shape." Denise grabbed the edge of the table. "And Emily?" The matron didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to a drawer behind her, unlocked it with a key from her necklace, and retrieved a single file. She handed it to Denise. Inside was a page with a black and white photo stapled to the top. Emily, age 10, expression blank, date 2009, status transferred, location redacted. Keller's eyes scanned the page. "Transferred where?" The matron closed the drawer with a soft thud. "To someone who believed she was destined for more." Denise's voice cracked. "To who?" The matron turned, walking slowly back to the center of the room. "To the man you really came to find." She looked directly at Keller. "Tiberiu Avram." Keller stepped forward. "He's alive. More than alive," the matron whispered. "He's waiting." Then she reached into her coat. Keller flinched, but she didn't pull a weapon. Just a phone. She pressed a single button. Somewhere deep in the compound, a door buzzed open, and a girl's voice, faint, hesitant, came through the speaker. "Hello?" Denise froze. Her face went pale. That voice, it wasn't a recording, it wasn't distorted. It was real. "Emily," she whispered. Silence. Then the voice again. "Who's asking?" Denise stumbled forward, heart in her throat. "Emily," she said again, louder this time. "It's me, it's Mom." A pause, long then static, cracked through the speaker. "No," the voice replied. "That's not true." Keller moved closer to the matron. "Where is she?" The woman turned, her eyes cool, unwavering. "She's listening. But hearing and remembering are not the same. We taught her to forget." Denise was shaking now, clutching the edge of the table like it might anchor her to something real. "Please," she said. "Let me see her." The matron said nothing. She only stepped aside and gestured toward the corridor behind her. Denise didn't wait. She ran. Keller followed, hand near his sidearm, mind racing. They moved through another set of iron doors, down a narrow corridor with peeling walls and old childlike drawings that flaked as they passed. Then, a small chamber. A light above the door flickered once, then held steady. Inside was a room no larger than a dormitory cell, and standing in the center was a woman, mid-30s, hair braided neatly, posture perfectly straight, her hands folded in front of her. She turned slowly, and her eyes, wide, hazel, unmistakable, locked onto Denise. For a moment, there was only silence. Keller held his breath. Denise took one step forward. "Emily," she whispered. The woman's head tilted. "I know that name," she said softly. "But I'm not her." Denise's knees nearly gave out. "No, you are. You're mine. They took you." The woman stepped back, shaking her head. "I was chosen," she said. "I wasn't taken. The matron told me. My mother left me in the forest. She didn't want me." "No," Denise gasped. "That's not true. They lied to you. I don't remember you. You were 5. Keller placed a hand gently on Denise's shoulder. "Emily, you were born July 2nd, 1990. You had a rabbit named Patch. You used to sleep with your socks on backwards because you hated the seam on your toes." The woman's breath caught. Her hand went to her mouth. "I remember that," she whispered. Denise stepped closer. "They made you forget. But I never stopped looking, never stopped loving you." Tears filled the woman's eyes. She sank slowly to her knees. "I don't know who I am," she said. Denise dropped to the floor with her. "You're my daughter." They stayed like that. 2 lives splintered by time, by hands that rewrote memory and twisted love into doctrine, and in that silence, that raw, broken silence, something shifted. But it didn't last, because behind them, footsteps echoed, slow, heavy, measured. Keller turned, and for the first time, laid eyes on him, Tiberiu Avram, alive, smiling and not alone. 2 men stood behind him, and between them, a girl. No more than 7. Same hazel eyes, same braided hair. Avram's voice was calm. "You came for the daughter you lost." He gestured to the child. "But she's already given me another." Keller stepped forward, blocking Denise and the woman, Emily, with his body. His hand hovered near the holster inside his coat, but he didn't move. Not yet. Avram stood just beyond the threshold, tall and calm, his black coat perfectly pressed. His presence felt unnatural in the crumbling place around him, like something eternal dressed in human skin. "You were never supposed to see this," he said. "But you brought us here," Keller replied. "Every clue, every photo. You wanted us to find her." Avram smiled faintly. "No, I wanted her to choose." He looked past Keller directly at Emily, the grown woman on her knees trembling beside her mother. For years she belonged to silence. She obeyed. She forgot. But somewhere inside her, something remained, and that interferes. Denise stood now, voice low and shaking. "She's not yours." Avram turned his gaze to her, cold amusement in his eyes. "She hasn't been yours for a very long time." He gestured to the girl beside him, the child with the same eyes, the same expressionless calm. "She's the next, and the one after her will come in time. The world forgets its children. I do not." Keller's voice turned sharp. "This ends now." Avram's smile widened. "You think you've uncovered something horrific, but I've built sanctuaries, order, clarity, while the world outside rots." He stepped forward. "I don't hurt them, I shape them." Emily stood suddenly, and for a moment everyone froze. She looked at Avram, then at the girl beside him, and her voice broke the silence like a match to dry grass. "No," she said, "you erase us." The girl flinched slightly. Avram turned toward Emily, face unreadable. "You forget yourself." "I remember enough," she replied. Denise reached for her hand. Emily took it. The first genuine contact in 30 years. Keller saw something shift behind Avram's eyes. The first flicker of uncertainty. That's when he moved. In a single motion, Keller drew his weapon, stepping sideways, shielding both women. He leveled it at Avram. "Call off your men, now." Avram raised one brow. "You won't shoot." "You're right," Keller said, "but I will expose everything." Avram's smile faded. Keller pulled a small transmitter from his pocket and held it up. "Live recording," he said. "This whole room is being streamed." It was a bluff, but Avram didn't know that. The two men beside him hesitated. The girl turned and stared at Emily. The likeness between them was now undeniable. Not just appearance, recognition, blood. Emily took a step forward. "Come here," she said softly. The girl looked at Avram, then back to Emily, and after a heartbeat, she let go of his hand. The moment the child stepped away from Avram, the room shifted. Not physically, but spiritually, as if something sacred had been returned. Avram didn't speak. He didn't move. He only stared at Emily with the cold resignation of a man watching his creation break itself from the mold. "You taught us to forget," Emily said, her voice steady now. "But forgetting doesn't erase truth. It just buries it deeper." The girl reached for Emily's hand. Emily knelt, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "What's your name?" she asked softly. The girl hesitated. "They called me Eleonora." Emily nodded. "Do you want to leave with us?" A pause, then a nod. Behind them, Denise held her breath. Keller still had his weapon drawn, but Avram made no move. His men stood in silence, waiting, listening. The power had shifted, and they knew it. Keller lowered the gun. There are journalists waiting in Tulsa, activists, police who were bribed and now want redemption. He stepped closer. "Everything you've built ends today." Avram looked past him, at the cracked dome above, then back to Emily. "I should have erased you fully." She held the child tighter, "But you didn't." And with that, they turned. No more words. No more threats. Just footsteps echoing through a hollow corridor. As they left the compound, the forest seemed to breathe again. Birdsong returned. The wind moved through the trees, and somewhere behind them, Haveli stood quiet, as if it knew. Its time had ended. The days that followed moved quickly. Interpol launched an investigation. The Romanian government, under mounting international pressure, began exhuming records long buried beneath layers of corruption and forgotten paperwork. Haveli was declared a crime scene. The matron was taken into custody without resistance. Her final words to Emily were whispered in Romanian, and Emily never repeated them. Avram vanished before police arrived. Some said he slipped across the Danube that night. Others claimed he died in the forest, devoured by the silence he'd once worshipped. But his empire fell, and those who survived began to speak. Emily and Eleonora traveled back to the United States with Denise and Keller. It wasn't easy. Healing never is. Emily suffered waves of memory, some clear, others like shards of glass in dark water. But each day she reclaimed something, her name, her voice, her past. Eleonora stayed close to her, often refusing to sleep unless Emily was nearby. In time, she began to smile, to draw, and her drawings, unlike the ones Emily had once made, were filled with sun, with trees that did not watch, but shaded, and rabbits. Always rabbits. One morning, nearly a year later, Emily stood on the porch of her new home in Vermont. Eleonora played in the yard with a stuffed bunny clutched to her. Denise brought out 2 cups of tea and handed one to her daughter. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Emily said, "Do you think she'll forget it all one day?" Denise looked at her. "I hope she remembers just enough to know she survived." Emily nodded. "She's stronger than I was." "You were strong too," Denise whispered. "You made it back." Emily looked down at her hands. "No, you made sure I was found." They sat there bathed in quiet, a silence no longer forced, but chosen, free.